Hello Year 7. Today we are going to have a look at Mary Shelley, who is the author of Frankenstein, and we're going to get to know the inspiration behind one of the most famous Gothic novels in literature. So can you please make sure that you write today's title, which is Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. So you will be able to see on Satchel 1, you will be able to see that this particular starter activity is already up in the form of a quiz. So I would normally get you to label each extract, stating whether it's pathetic fallacy or whether it's foreshadowing, but I'm going to get you to do it in the form of a quiz. So I think the main thing to remember here is that pathetic fallacy is to do with the weather or a setting reflecting what is happening in the scene, but foreshadowing is when there are hints as to what is going to come later in an extract. Okay. So I will read these out to you, just in case your reading isn't very confident. So the first one then. Number 1, a teenage girl leaves the house for an evening out with her friends. Her mother makes her a promise to be back before midnight. The girl kisses her mother and says, "She worries too much, she'll be fine," she says. Number 2, during the whole of a dull, dark and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country. Number 3, when Ruth Jones's alarm clock woke her at 7 o'clock that morning, she had no idea that today would be the longest day of her life. Next one, the first thing Mary saw when she pulled back the curtains was a solitary magpie sitting on the fence. She waited for a second bird to appear, but no magpie came. It is absolutely worth mentioning at this point that there is a rhyme that you may need to know for that, and that is that whenever you see a magpie, it goes 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy. And the final one that I would like you to say is pathetic fallacy or foreshadowing is the dark, flat wilderness was the marshes, and that the distant savage lair from which the wind was rushing was the sea, and that the small bundle of shivers growing afraid of it all and beginning to cry was Pip. Okay, so that is your starter quiz. Make sure that you have a go on Satchel 1, please. So, Mary Shelley then. So she was born on the 30th of August in 1797 and she died on the 1st of February in 1851. She wrote Frankenstein when she was just 18 years old. Now that is really, really young to be writing such a huge novel. So Mary Shelley's early life then. She was born in Great Britain in 1797 to well-known, very intellectual parents. Her father was a political philosopher and her mother was a feminist activist. Unfortunately, her mother died within a month of giving birth to Mary. So she was raised by her father, who educated her himself. At the age of just 16, Mary met the young poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, who was married at the time. Later, his wife died, so Mary and Percy got married. But before they were married, Mary and Percy escaped to Lake Geneva in Switzerland and stayed with a close friend and very famous poet, Lord Byron. He is often known as the first emo because of the way that he used to write his poems. So due to bad weather, all of the friends were forced to stay indoors for long periods of time. And they passed the time by reading old ghost stories, which inspired Byron to suggest a ghost story writing competition between the three of them. So after a scientific discussion late one night, Mary had a really vivid dream that ultimately inspired her story. And Mary Shelley was the only one of the three to turn her story into a novel, which was later published in 1818, and there was a second edition published in 1831. So what did she dream about then? Shelley dreamt of a pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. So, how can we link her dream to the story of Frankenstein then? Hopefully you have realised that the pale student of wicked arts is Victor Frankenstein, and he was kneeling beside the thing he had put together, which is quite obviously Frankenstein's monster. So your task for today then, I would like you to please imagine that you were going to take part in Lord Byron's ghost story competition. I would like for you to write the opening paragraph to your own ghost story. It needs to include at least one of either pathetic fallacy or foreshadowing. It needs to include a Gothic setting. And it needs to include a first-person narrative, so that means that you need to be using I and me rather than he, him, or her, etc. So a first-person narrative with some insight into their thoughts and feelings. So what are they thinking and how are they feeling? That is what you need to include. There are some images on the next slide which might help to inspire your setting and description. Okay, so just one final thing to note then, you don't need to submit your work for me to mark, because I certainly will not have time to mark it before we get back to school. However, I do need you to make sure that you have completed the starter quiz for today. Okay guys, I hope that you enjoyed today's lesson, and I'm just going to say that I'm quite excited to be seeing you soon, that we're going to be back to learning in a school environment. Okay guys, thank you very much.